Yeah. Welcome to the Australian Calabrese Cultural Association program Sono Calabrese, a program where we speak to people from our community who can tell us a little bit about their experiences here in Australia and also in Calabria if they're returned there. Our guest today is Elena Gareffa from Mildura, and she will tell us what she's been doing in Mildura for, I won't say the number of years, but for a very long time, and we're very pleased to have her. Thank you, Elena, and welcome. And perhaps if you can tell the viewers where we are at the moment, which is obviously one of your locations.
Sì, buongiorno, Vince. Yeah. Lovely to be part of this survey that's very close to my heart. We're in Mildura. We live in a suburb of Mildura called Orimple. We have a lovely place here overlooking the Kings Billabong River area of Mildura. On this farm we grow grapes. We both grow grapes for fresh fruit or dry fruit.
And in fact, you run tabletop grapes, as I understand it. Is that right?
That's right, yes. We created tabletop grapes.
And what does that do so that people...
Okay, with tabletop grapes, we've developed that now. We've been over 50 years now. We had our 50th anniversary this year, actually, so we've been on a property since we were married. I'll give you a bit of history how we started off on the land. Both Gino and I were doing other businesses. Gino was an electrician. He came out from Italy as an electrician by the government because Australia was looking for electricians at the time. So he was lucky enough he didn't come by boat. They actually put him on a plane, and he travelled on a plane to come to Australia. And I was a hairdresser. I had my own salon, beautician in Mildura for about quite a number of years. I run my own salon, very busy salon. It come to a stage, the first year we were married, Gino, we didn't have air conditioners in Mildura. Everyone was putting in air conditioners in Mildura. And we had a small property at that stage, which was our first property of 10 acres in town. Anyhow, Gino come home from work one day and it was about 40 degrees for a whole week, and he was underneath houses and on top of roofs. He was putting air conditioners on, and he used to come home hot and sweaty and full of that dust from all the dirt in the roofs, and they used to put in something like 6 air conditioners a day. It was go. So he come home one day and he said, I've got to find something better than this. So he, from our 10-acre property we were living on, we went looking for a larger property. At the time I was still working. He was still working as an electrician until we found the property. And we went looking, and we bought this property where we built the house here. 2 years later, from 1972, we bought this in about 74. We then bought another property nearby, and a third property and a fourth property. So we built quite an empire of properties. I stayed working in my salon until I had the first 2 children. We had 6 children, but while I still had the first 2 and even the third child, I still kept myself in the salon, just to make sure there's another income. We had to pay our bills. After the third child, I left the salon and worked on a property too. Now, you've got to realise this was about 1970. I gave up in about the late 70s. And people of my era in those days weren't working. A lot of them, they married young, they stayed at home, they had to work on a block. They didn't have the opportunity to work elsewhere and become a beautician or a hairdresser, because in those days a lot of the parents didn't let their girls go away. We were lucky when my mother let me go. I went to Melbourne and stayed there for 12 months.
If I can ask, in terms of your parents, when did they arrive in Australia?
Okay, yeah. They arrived in Australia. Dad came in 1952. Right. He left me at 1 year old. and came in 1952.
So you were born in Calabria?
I was born in Calabria.
Whereabouts?
Yes, in Benestari, it's near Bovolino. There's nearby Locri, only about 20 minutes away. Rucella's only a short way away.
And that would be in the province of Reggio?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And did you have siblings?
Yes, at the time that we migrated, I had two sisters, older than me, and I was the youngest.
Right. And was there any children born in Australia?
And then we had, my parents had two boys born in Australia.
Okay. And I know one of them is Fred.
Yes, and Joe.
And Joe.
Giuseppe. Ferdinando. He's actually Fred, you know how we change our names.
Okay.
Ferdinando and Giuseppe.
And your maiden name was Pascale?
Pascali.
Okay.
Not Pasquali, Pascali.
Pascali.
So it was Clemente Pascali and Maria Giuseppa.
Right. So you came out when, what, you were 2? Or how old were you when you came out?
I was two and a bit.
So all of your education was in Australia?
Yes.
And yet you've got a very, very strong identity of Calabrese. Is that due to your parents and how they lived their lives in Mildura?
I think so. I don't know. As you just have it in you, and I always enjoyed my mother's culture. I enjoyed making the sauce, enjoyed making the salami. I enjoyed the music my mother played. I used to love it. You know, she used to play that music. I used to think, oh, how beautiful. You know, all that old-fashioned music, those songs. You know. And I grew up enjoying them.
And your mother actually started off a folklore group, or folkloric group. Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah. When did she do that?
Mildura didn't have a representative for Italian culture. It was in the 1970s, and I remember there was all the Italian consolati and everything coming to Mildura. And she was approached because people could see she was enjoying that. She used to be a dressmaker and do all sorts of things like that. And they approached her, could she get a group together, a Taratella group together, because they've got an Italian consul, we've got nothing to show him from here, from Mildura, So my mother, of course, being my mother, she got these kids together, she found all these kids and she knew their parents, and they come together, she sewed the costumes, my mother would sit at the sewing machine, she'd just sew it without a pattern, and she'd have all these vests done, beautiful costumes, and she had them all done. She taught these kids how to dance, and that's how the group started.
And you were part of the group?
And I was part of that. My children were part of it.
And what about your sisters? Were they part of the group?
No, they weren't, no.
And was that because they were older and didn't have the interest, or the...
I don't know. I've always had that interest. Probably because I had the interest. It's so much so that my mother saw me here one day when she came. This is an older age, probably about a year before she passed away. She said, "Elena," she said, "this group can't just disappear."
No.
She said, "You're the one that can take it on. You're the one that can continue this group." And I thought, oh my goodness, this is a big thing to ask. So I said, "Look, Mum, as long as I can find the people, it'll go on."
And you did, and you've carried on now for quite a while,
That's
haven't
right.
you? And in fact, you even took it to Italy or Calabria, right?
Oh yes,
Yeah.
we then of course my mother was no longer here, and I remember I just didn't have enough people to dance in a group, and I remember walking into school one day, taking my kids, because my kids were younger, I had younger kids, and I had, and I remember saying, "Mum, you have to help me find somebody. You're up there, help me find somebody." And I remember just walking past one of the teachers that I knew, and she was a music and dance teacher, and I said, "Helen, would you know anyone that wants to do Italian dancing?" She said, "Italian dancing? I'll do it." And Helen came into the group too. And from there I found my other Australian friends even. And they came in and they were enjoying it better than Calabrese.
Right.
And I had the Calabrese people in there. Well, we got I had this new strength in me that I had to do it. Anyhow, I practiced with this group and they were so good. We actually went to Italy and we performed, lots of performances. Went firstly to my own town in Benestari when they'd done the Festa della Madonna. We danced there. And the people were just amazed that. But they said, "But you went to Australia when you were 2. How can you do this?" I said, "Just remember, my mother was born here, in the house, we were Calabrese. I enjoyed that, it was beautiful. And we went out, we're still Australian. We're not that we're living like we outside, we're not just in our capsule. We are Australian outside. We do everything. I can cook Australian if I want to. But our culture, our language, this is how it is. This is how we grew up. It's in our heart. We can't lose that. Because it's just something we enjoy. And it was lovely for me, not only to enjoy it for myself, but to bring people in that were going to see this culture through dance, through music, through and by being involved with the dance group, we also involved people ask us to like schools to go and cook pasta for the kids, do performance at schools. We done performance at festies. We got invited to every festy. So much so, even when Lady Diana came to Mildura, she was in Mildura for one day. My mother and the group got invited to go inside the barrier where they could actually meet. And my mother she had a card about the dance group. She pulled it out of her pocket and gave it to Prince Charles. And Prince Charles looked at it and put it in his pocket. Right. And this is all opportunities we had from being involved. And we get asked to go and perform lots of places. Just recently I had to go and teach a family who's having a 100th year anniversary for their nonno that arrived in Australia, who was no longer here, 100 years that he arrived just recently, just before Christmas. And this family, who are now pretty much Australianised and don't speak Italian, but they wanted to, on behalf of their nonno, to celebrate. Their nonno was from Sicily. From Cosenza, actually. Cosenza or some part around there. And their nonna was from Sicily. So this family wanted to celebrate on behalf of their nonna. They wanted to do a tarantella dance. So I said, you know what? I knew the family that had a lot of younger ones. I said, would you like your family to do it? I said, I'll teach you. So I taught them how to dance the tarantella, put a group together. So I gave them all the costumes and all that. They came in on a day. I was in there with them. They came in on a day with their own family. It was so beautiful.
How many tours did you do of Italy with your folk group?
While we were in Italy, we done Calabria. We danced there, and then we met. We went to Roccagilento, where we stayed in Roccagilento at a convent. And we met Don Hilario di Chiera, who was a priest in that region, who was born here in Mildura, and he had a lot of connection. We done around that area. We done about 7 performances. We went into the schools and done a performance. We actually had a kangaroo doing a little bit of a dance too. Like it wasn't actually a real kangaroo, but we had the costume of a kangaroo. We done so many performances, and it was just, we were so welcomed by everybody. It was really, really special.
Now, I want to ask you about growing up. Obviously, education, you went through the system here. What's your recollection about being at school and how other people, other students related to you and how the teachers related to you?
Well, going to school and being a Calabrian at home and going to school being Australian, you sort of had to fit in. You had to fit in, but you felt different. You felt that you were different to them. When I say them, like one day, this is my first experience, one of my first experiences. My friend asked me to go. She lived across the school because my mother wouldn't let me go anywhere, without her. So I went to her place for lunch. She came to my place, have your lunch at my place. And I said, all right, it's just across the road. And my first experience there was, this is different. They had on their table jars of jam all along the table. And their lunch was, you get a slice of bread and you put your jam on there and you eat it. And I sort of thought, Okay, I didn't comment, but my eyes were just blown because I thought it's so different to us. We'd be sitting there with a plato de pasta for lunch, piatti pasta or ensalada or something like that.
But it's amazing the similarities. I've got to tell you a similar thing that I went through. Our next door neighbour were obviously English kids, but with a Scottish background. And so one day Wayne says to me, look, come over for dinner. And Dad says, all right, here you go. So we go there and dinner was baked beans, right? And I thought, and so to reciprocate, a week later I said to Wayne, come over to dinner at my house. Anyway, and he came and obviously Mum served up pasta and he says, what's this? I said, look, it's pasta, right? I said, and he had a taste. Oh, he says, it's delicious. Anyway, he ate the bowl, and the short story is that thereafter, every night he could, he'd come over for dinner.
Yes.
And Mum kept saying, you know, Wayne, you better go and get Wayne.
Yes, yeah.
And yours is a similar story, the difference
similar
in the food, which is
yes.
also, I think, a cultural difference.
Yes, and also, coming to that, I had dinner, of course, as I said earlier, I went to Melbourne for 12 months to study beautician and hairdressing, and we stayed in a hostel run by the Sisters of Mercy or some nuns, because my mother made sure that we stayed at a place that was strict. So, I stayed there. Yeah. So of course, and I didn't mind the Australian food, but Marion Holden, her name was, the matron of the hostel, she said, now girls, save your lamb chops, the bones, save the bones of your lamb chops because I've got to make dripping. I didn't hear the word dripping ever. And I'm thinking, I'm so curious, I'm thinking, what's this dripping she's talking about? And I didn't want to ask, I didn't want to act dumb, so I didn't ask what this dripping was. Well, one morning, come in the kitchen to have my breakfast, and she said, I'm making dripping today. And I thought, oh, right, this is my time to see what this dripping was. So she had all these bones from the lamb chops that we had the night before, that us girls, it was 8 of us, I think, staying in the hostel, and she was melting them on a dripping thing with the holes in the fat would drip into the bottom, and that would be what they cooked with the next time they fried something. And I said to myself, I remember quite clearly thinking, oh, and they reckon olive oil's not good. And that's when I realised, at that moment that I don't have to be ashamed of what we use in our kitchens, that what we use is pretty good. And after that, I think that was my eye-opener where I went, whoa, you know, proud of who I was and being appreciated for what we could do.
I want to ask you, from what you've said, clearly your parents would have been considered very strict.
Yes.
And you know, when you say that they made sure that you went to a particular place, how did you feel about that? Did you just accept it, or did you resent it, or?
You know, I didn't resent it at all. I felt secure.
Right.
I didn't resent it. I accepted the rule of the house, and I think I felt that sense of security.
Yeah. And in another way, you were unique in the sense that they did allow you to go to Melbourne. Most parents at that time would have said no.
Yes.
You either stay home until you get married, or if there's a school here that you can go, you go. Otherwise
you don't.
You don't.
And not only that, that's very true. And also, my mother got backlash from other relatives saying, how could you send your daughter away? Oh, because as I said, my era, I'm talking about my era, not now. And no one was allowed to go anywhere. They weren't allowed to go to uni or study unless it was here. So we're very fortunate for that,
And there's another element to that as well, I think, because at that time, a lot of women, or a lot of girls, they weren't allowed to get an education because parents thought it wasn't necessary, because their role was meant to be mothers like their mothers.
Yes.
Did you experience that?
No, I didn't experience that at all. My mother actually would have loved me to become a doctor or a lawyer or something like that, and I couldn't see myself being anything like that. I was good with my hands. I felt I wasn't really good with my brain, but I could see now that I could have been anything I wanted to. So I experienced that. That with a lot of my friends that weren't allowed to go, and that's when. Sorry, coming back into what I chose to do, working on the land. When I chose to work on the land with my husband, and my friends at that stage were saying, "Oh, how could you do it? You had such a good job." You know, like it was.
Yeah.
Why would you leave beautician hairdressing to work on the block?
Yeah.
And then I realised. That's when I realised that. These guys weren't giving a chance to do something else.
Yeah.
It wasn't their choice. They married, they had to do it on the land. I was given a choice. I done that, and then I chose to work on the land. It was a big difference.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And what about you said you had 2 older sisters.
Yes.
What did they do?
One of them done hairdressing as well.
Right.
The other one of them married, and she worked on the land. She married quite young.
Right.
Yeah.
And your brothers?
And the brothers, one took over the hairdressing when I gave up, and my sister gave up. He took over the salon, and he just recently retired. And they worked on the land as well. They had to work on the land with my mum and dad until they found their own way. And one of them, Fred, he worked on the land, and he sort of started going with my father to the markets.
Right. We can get that.